All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. If people are still kind of rolling in, that's okay. This session will be recorded, so if anyone shows up later or can't make it today, the recording will be provided after the fact, as well as the slides and any subsequent source documentation, resources, or help material that we reference today. Everything will be available to everybody after today's session as well. So I just want to extend a thank you to everyone. Thanks for joining today. I appreciate you guys making the time, especially for those of you that have joined the first session that we had. So, I know finding time for 2 sessions is a big ask, but I appreciate everyone creating the time and everyone's hard work in managing everything in the system. Today, what we're going to be going through is a continuation of reporting actions in Amplifund for your CCCFF awards. So I'm going to go over, and I only have a few slides. The slides are mostly just to talk about just an overview of the items that we'll be looking at how to complete today. So we'll be walking through that together. I want to make sure that you know where to access all of the resources for your projects on the DED website and also on the Amplifund support site. So I'll be walking through that. Couple of quick reminders for 2021 recipients, and then we'll dive in and actually do the demonstration and walk through all the different steps that we'll be looking to complete within Amplifund. I will mention as well that with today's session, we'll make sure that there's some time at the end for questions. Also, there is a chat feature, and we have staff monitoring the chat. So Dave is on the call from Amplifund, and he will be monitoring the chat for any questions specific to Amplifund functionality. There's also resources from DED on the call that will be available to support and provide any guidance regarding program specific questions. So please feel free to utilize the chat feature in your Zoom as we get rolling and if you have any questions. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. And I just want to take a look at some of the actions that we're going to be taking in Amplifund today and some of the things that you're going to be asked to complete. One thing that I always like to mention getting started is logging into Amplifund. For those of you that are current awardees or that are used to utilizing Amplifund, you know that Amplifund can be accessed via the URL ne.amplifund.com. So please feel free to log in and type in your established credentials to log in, and you can do that from anywhere. Once you're logged in, you'll be able to view your organization's Amplifund account and manage any DED grants that you may have. I will also mention that it's always good to just kind of bookmark that page so you don't lose your spot. And if you need any assistance in getting logged in or getting invited into the system, please feel free to reach out to your program reps, your grant managers at DED. So one of the things that we're going to be taking a look at today when we first log in is we're going to be logging in and looking at your award and then looking at your budget and talking about how to add in some expenses against your budget. Along with adding in expenses, we're going to be taking a look at how to enter in achievements. Everyone has 2 performance plan goals, 2 narrative goals that we have to respond to before the end of the project. So we're going to be taking a look at how you can access those questions and how you can answer those questions. Submitting reporting periods is an essential part of the process for both the performance and budget. So we're going to take a look at how to do those and how to accomplish those reporting periods. When you're all done with your program and you're ready to submit your final reimbursement, I'll walk you through the process of how you can submit that final reimbursement request. Scattered throughout all this functionality that we're looking at today are tasks that are assigned to you. And you may have already received some emails notifying you of tasks that are assigned to you. So as we accomplish each step, I'll be going through and I'll be indicating to you how you can mark those tasks as complete. And of course, as part of the final reporting, once your project is complete, once you've submitted your final reimbursement request, once you've submitted your performance reporting periods, you'll be required to complete a final report by answering some questions and getting that created and submitted as part of the final reporting process. So it's a lot to cover today. We're going to walk through it step by step. And also, you have a number of resources that are going to be available to you, or that are already available to you on the DED website. So there are Amplifund specific documents and videos that DED put together for you. So in addition to the recording today and the walkthrough that we're going to do interactively, you'll also have those videos to reference when you're working on your own, as well as any other documentation resources guide that you'll have as you're working through some things. So I want to make sure that we go through and we look at the support site and that we talk through some of the different options that you have available to you. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to jump in and we're going to look at the help page, but also I did want to provide a reminder to 2021 grant recipients. There are specific tasks that are due today, and we'll get into the system and we'll have another opportunity to look at these tasks and how we can mark that they've been accomplished or that they've been completed. But some of the tasks that are due today for 2021 award recipients are having to assign your recipient grant manager, upload your contract, complete your ACH form, and submit that advance payment request. Those are a lot of the items that we went through in a previous training session. And if you haven't already done them, just wanted to provide a friendly reminder that these specific tasks are due today for any 2021 recipients. All right. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to transition away from the slideshow portion of today's session. And I am going to open up Amplifund, and we're going to get started by walking through that specific set of actions that I mentioned we're going to be looking at today. But now, before we do that, I just want to draw our attention to the Nebraska help page as well. So opportunity.nebraska.gov/Amplifund is going to be your source for all that help documentation that I just mentioned. So you'll notice when you go to this page, you'll be able to scroll down. There are a lot of different programs represented here. You'll want to find the one for the CCCFF program. And you'll notice here that there are a number of resources that are available to you in the form of documents as well as videos. So DED spent a lot of time and put together these specific step-by-step guides with screenshots that will help you complete these different actions in the system. So in addition to these documents where you can find those screenshots and an outline of everything that you need to accomplish within the system, you'll also be able to leverage videos that walk you through how to do them as well. So you'll see here our last month's training is also posted here. And then you'll be able to leverage any one of these other videos that have been provided. So again, opportunity.nebraska.gov is where you'll be able to find these resources. Just like, as I mentioned before with Amplifund, I would definitely recommend bookmarking this page if you haven't already, as there's a lot of valuable information here that you probably want to access at any given point. All right, so let's transition now and actually log into Amplifund, and we can start walking through our different scenarios and the different actions that I said that we were going to go through and complete today. So I'm going to walk through all these different actions step by step. Just remember, I will make sure that we have time at the end for questions, and also, and in addition to having time at the end for questions, if you have any questions as we're going through this, please feel free to utilize the chat feature within Zoom to reach out and to ask any specific questions. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to access the CCCFF award that we're managing. And once we're logged into Amplifund here, I'm going to go to the grant management section and click on grants to access any grants that my organization may have. Now, I'm particularly interested in my CCCFF awards. You'll see that I have a couple here. I'm going to utilize, I'm going to go to my planning grant because this is the grant that, I want to start taking a look at with the budget and adding in expenses. So when I go and when I click on the name of my grant that I want to report for, here I'll see a number of key pieces of information. So it's always good to just kind of scroll through and look at some of the key details like how much has been awarded, also making sure that you're utilizing and you're reporting against the right grant by checking the award identification number. You'll be able to see that here. For 2021 recipients that have not yet added their recipient grant manager, this is also where you would do that. So you'll see here, I've added myself here as the recipient grant manager. If you need to do this, then all you have to do is click the pencil icon here to edit this page, and you'll be able to add in your recipient grant manager. So this page stores a lot of key details about your grant. But the first thing that I want to do and that we want to do together today is talk about entering expenses against your grant's budget. So I'm going to go in the post-award tab under financial, and that's where I'm going to find my budget. So I will click on the link for my budget, which will take me to our budget page. So here on the budget page, what I should see here is any budget categories that I have. Since this is a planning grant, then this is what my budget category looks like. And the way that the budget is displayed here is that its default view is going to be to show just the grant funded. If you also wanted to see what your match amount is, then you can go here under this options section and you'll be able to click on the match box. And then that's going to open up the match column within your budget view. So here I can clearly see that I have my budget category for my consultant fees from a planning grant, $15,000 of grant funds, and we have $20,000 of match. And you'll be able to clearly see this, when you're scrolling down, you'll be able to see your total award amounts here. Now, when you're ready to actually get in and start reporting and entering and adding in expenses, there are a couple of different ways that you'll be able to add in expenses. The first way is just by looking at your line item and clicking on the dollar sign here. This will take you into the expense page. Also, you can go to activity and expenses and access the expense page where you'll be able to create expenses quickly. But my preferred method is going to the post-award menu, financial tab, and expenses. So 3 different ways to get you to the same place. In my opinion, the easiest way is probably post-award, financial, and expenses. So when I click on that expenses tab there in that post-award drop-down menu under the financial section, this is going to take me to my expense page. Our expense page is going to provide us with a couple of different options to get started. Number one, you'll see here at the top where you can assign a certain amount of filters and then run, meaning that this is a report that you can run to see any existing expenses that you may already have within for this one particular grant. You can also filter it down to break this down by category. If you had more than one category, you can also choose different time frames, including creating a custom time frame with which to see any existing expenses. If you just click into the expenses page and select run, it'll just show you all expenses for this grant that have ever been entered. And I can see that I already have one. Now, it's probably going to be most common that you don't have any as we're getting started now, but But please, if you do, then don't be surprised when you see some expenses listed here. When you're ready to actually add in expenses, you'll go to this all expenses section, and under the actions tab, there's a plus sign. So when you're ready to create your first expense, you're going to go ahead and click on the plus sign to create your expense record. So it's important here to note that when you create your expense record, there are a certain number of details that need to be included. And we'll start by walking through what those details are here. So the first thing that it's going to ask you for here at the top are what your grant, budget category, and line item are for. I think for the majority of us, we only have that one, whichever one specific category, depending on the project type that we have. So just go in and make sure that your category and your line item are correct for the expense that we're adding. When we're adding in our expenses here, we're going to type in the direct cost. The direct cost field here needs to represent the total amount for this particular expense between match funds and grant funds. Now, I will mention that it is recommended, because you've already requested your first advance request. It is recommended that when you go in here that you request your match funds first until you meet your match requirement. So one thing that I'll note here is there's the one-to-one match requirement. Some of us may have matching funds over the one-to-one requirement, but it is recommended that when you're adding in your expenses, you are adding in your match expenses. You're adding that in until you get up to your required match amount. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in my first expense, and regardless of if it's match funds or just grant funded expense, we still need to put in our direct cost here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll add in my first expense for $10,000. I do not want to check the box that excludes this from match, because again, I want to utilize my match funds, and I want to spend those first, and I want to indicate those first. The next thing you'll see here are the responsible individual. It'll show you the email or the username for the individual that's entering in the expense. So right now this is my email address. And then here you're going to put in the expense date. So this is going to be really important in the context of, first you're going to want to put in a date that actually reflects the true expense date. It should be a date within the project start and the end date. But also this is going to be important because once we enter in our expenses, we're going to have to submit what's called a budget reporting period. And the budget reporting periods are set on a semi-annual interval. So understanding, what expense dates you're putting in will allow you to better understand and handle which budget reporting periods those expenses are going to roll up into. So I'm just going to use today's date as an example. It will always default to today's date. So if you go in tomorrow to enter in your expenses, this will default to 5/20/2021. You can use the calendar option here to change that and to indicate a different date, but it will always default to today's date. On your expense status here, you'll be able to indicate and change this accordingly. In order for this expense to roll up into your reporting period, which is what we want, and in order for those to roll up into your reporting period and eventually your payment request, we're going to have to mark these expenses as reviewed. Now, you can mark the expenses as reviewed as you're creating it, or you can create them first and then review them after the fact. But again, it's typically easier if, as we're creating the expense itself, I'm just marking it as reviewed as I'm creating it. There are some other fields here, like our description field, where you can add in any notes if you want. The financials tab is where you'll indicate how much of that direct cost. So remember here I put in that this expense is $10,000. The financials tab is where I indicate how much of that $10,000 is matching funds. So again, since I want to reach my required match amount first, and I want to enter in expenses accordingly, then I'm going to go here and I'm going to say that this entire $10,000 is cash match. As soon as I enter that, you'll be able to see here that the match amount is $10,000 and the grant funded amount is 0. Another way that you could have done that is by just indicating as a percentage that 100% of this is your match amount. So you'll have the ability to configure this either as a dollar or as a percentage. You'll be able to configure this accordingly. So again, it's important to to look at that grant, that direct cost, go into your financials tab and indicate how much of that direct cost is actually the matching funds. That'll be really helpful in terms of, itemizing that and going through as you're creating those, making sure that everything there is accounted for. Another item that's really important here when you're adding in a specific expense is next to the financials tab, we have the attachments tab. So here on the attachments tab, utilize this section here to upload any source documentation for the expense that you're reporting in. So for example, here, you would click choose file and you would upload your invoice or your receipt, whatever this may be, add those to the individual expenses. Once you've added your expense, go ahead and click on create. And now we have our second expense added in here. Let's go ahead and let's do that one more time. And I'll add in another expense. So to add another expense, we just go back and click on that plus sign, and the steps are going to be the same. We want to make sure that we're adding in our expense against the correct category, the correct line item. Here, this direct cost is going to be the total amount. So my match requirement here is $15,000, even though I'm actually matching, total of $20,000. So here on the direct cost, let's say I have another expense that's for $10,000. So I'm going to split this one out between grant funds and match funds. So my direct cost here will be $10,000. The expense date I'll use as the same. Remember, our expense status needs to be reviewed. When I go to the financials tab, instead of making this a 100% match, I can go here and I can say, well, I've already expensed 10,000 of my 15,000 required match. So this is going to be, I'm only going to match this one $5,000. And you'll see how that splits between the grant funded amount and the match amount. So when you're here in this financials tab, just always make sure that you're indicating how much of your total direct cost is matched, and then these calculations will update for you. Again, our attachments tab needs to have the source documentation for these expenses. And then you'll go ahead and you'll click on create. And now we have an additional expense that we've entered. Since the best practice or the required route to go when entering expenses is to first spend your required match funds, then then expense the grant funded amount, the grant funds, and then after that, whatever match you have left over, it's probably a good idea to have a couple of ways where you can keep track of how much you've already expensed against some of these individual against your match funds and against your grant funds. So we recommend leveraging one of the reports that's available to you, where you'll be able to see how much grant funds were allocated to you, and then how much you've spent to date. And that report is accessed by going to the Reports tab here in the left navigation menu, clicking on Post Award, and clicking on the Grant Budget Variance Report. So I'm actually going to right click on this so I can open this in a new tab. That way I have the report open and I have my expense page open as well. Anywhere in Amplifund where you want to look at two things at once or you want to have a few pages open at the same time, you will absolutely have the ability to do that by right clicking and opening it up in a new window. So you'll see this is just opened in a new tab. I still have my grant expenses page open here. So it'll be nice to leverage this report and then go back to my expenses page, for example. So here, I'm looking at what's called the grant budget variance report. And I can see it's pulling the report automatically from my planning grant. If you have more than one grant, you may have to use the filter here on the right-hand side to filter and choose the grant that you want to run this report for. So what I'm seeing on my grant budget variance report is I can see my category and I can see my line item. If I scroll over, I can look at the total amount that I have budgeted, the grant funds for this award, for this grant, and I can see what my match is. So remember, and then here I can see what the actual expenses that have been entered against the grant funded amount, and then the actual expenses that have been entered against my cash match amount. So remember, our best practice and what we want to do here is we want to first expense all of our expenses to the required cash match. So we want to hit that first when we're creating these expenses. So I can see that I've already hit the one-to-one requirement. So now when I add in new expenses, I can expense the rest. I can expense the additional amount here to the grant funds to make that work. So it's always nice to reference this report. You'll be able to look at how much you actually have spent so far, and then you'll be able to see the match that you have already. So I'm using 20,000 cash match, so I can add in an additional expense. And so let's just go to our other tab here, and I'll create a new expense. And again, the process of creating the expense is the same. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to enter in the correct category and the correct line item. On the direct cost, let's say I have another expense here for $7,000. So I have another, so I have this other expense for $7,000. We have our expense date, and then of course the expense status, which has to be changed to reviewed. So since I have another $5,000 left I have to hit on my cash match, I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to say of this $7,000, 5,000 is match. And that's going to get me to that $20,000 match contribution that I was mentioning before. So now I'm going to go ahead and click on create. And I have my new expense that I've created. I can go back to my budget variance report. If you need to just run this again, then you can just refresh the page and that should update your totals. I'm going to scroll over and I can see here that I've expensed $8,000 of grant funds and I've expensed my $20,000 in cash match funds. So any additional expenses now need to be for that, need to go towards that 15,000 of grant funds that I've been awarded. So let's go back here. Let's hop back in. And I'm going to create one more expense. Same process, clicking that plus sign, going through, and going through and adding in your category and your line item. And then here, I'm going to add in the remaining grant fund amount that I've expensed. There's going to be no match because I've already used my match fund. So you can either check this box or you can just leave it unchecked and not enter anything here in the match. Of course, attach your source documentation here. And remember, we're supposed to be marking these as reviewed, but I want to show you an example of what happens if I forget to, or if I don't mark it as reviewed as I'm creating the expense. So I'll go ahead and click on create here. And I can see all my expenses are reviewed except for this one. So even though I forgot to mark this expense as reviewed, I can still mark it as reviewed by either clicking the pencil icon and editing the expense and marking it as reviewed, or I can check the box here, locate my check mark, and mark it as reviewed. So please feel free that if you forget to mark more than one as reviewed, use this select all feature here or the check boxes to indicate which ones you want to go ahead and mark as reviewed. And you can mark it as reviewed from this page by selecting the expense with the checkbox and then selecting the actual check mark itself. It's going to ask you, are you sure you want to mark it as reviewed? Go ahead and say that, yes, I'm sure. And then now I can see all my expenses have been entered in here. Let's take a look at our grant budget variance report, and I'll refresh this again. And remember, the grant budget variance report can be accessed at any time by going to your report section, clicking on post award, and clicking on the grant budget variance report. So now that I have all my expenses entered, I can scroll over. I can see that I've expensed my grant funds. I've expensed all my matching funds. Everything looks good here. So again, the grant budget variance report is a great tool to utilize in terms of seeing where you are with tracking your different expenses. One other thing that I'll mention specifically about the grant budget variance report is that you have the ability to export your grant budget variance report into a PDF, an Excel file, or a rich text like a Word document. So if you prefer to export your grant budget variance report and provide it to somebody, or just to utilize in a different format outside of the system, please feel free to export this report accordingly. So now that I have all of my various expenses entered, I want to talk a little bit about how we can submit our budget reporting periods, right? Because we're going to go through the process of entering in expenses, submitting reporting periods, and then submitting our payment request. So I'm going to go to find my reporting period section. I'm going to go into the post award menu, and I'm going to go to management, and I'm going to go to reporting periods. Now, again, depending on your award and depending on what you've done previously, you may have a reporting period that's created already, you may not. In this scenario, I don't have anything that's been created. So I'm going to go, and to get started, I'm going to click on the plus sign to create my reporting period. So it's going to ask me what type of reporting period do I want to create. And you'll have the option to choose from expenses or achievements. So is this for budget or is this for performance? Since we're going to first focus on the budget and the expense reporting periods, I'm going to start there, and I'm just going to select the expense reporting periods. We're going to take a look at the achievements one here in a little bit. The next thing it asks me is, what is the actual period that I would like to create here? So this is where it's really important to note which expense date you're putting in when you were entering in your expenses. Remember how I told you that it's going to default to whatever today's date is? So since I created all those expenses for May 19th, then that means those expenses are going to be included in whichever semi-annual reporting period here that May 19th of 2021 is included in. So I'm going to choose this one because this has the month of May, and all my expenses had an expense date of May. So my expectation here that when I create this reporting period, when I click on save, my expectation of the reporting period is that it should have all of my expenses that I entered in for the month of May, or for any expense date that's within this start and end date here. So that's why on that expense record itself, it's very important to pay attention to the expense date and make sure that we're putting in the correct expense date. Here it's showing me my total awarded amount. This is just the grant funds, and it's showing me my total expensed amount for this period, which we already know is the $15,000 in the grant funds, as well as our additional 20,000 of matching funds. Here it's going to show me if I have any unreviewed expenses. Remember, again, when we were doing the expense creation, we went through and we indicated which expenses were going to be reviewed, because that determined which expenses get rolled into the reporting period. If you had made a mistake, or if you had forgotten to mark an expense as reviewed, it would highlight that here. It would tell you, and you'd be able to go back to your expense page. So it would tell you, like, you have one unreviewed expense, or you have two unreviewed expenses for this time frame, and you'd be able to go back and mark those as reviewed. Scrolling down, there are additional sections which are optional. You do not have to put any information in here. There's some additional information about your budget and about your expenses. When you're ready to submit this reporting period and close this out, then you're going to go ahead and click on close. In order for these expenses to roll into your payment request, and it's also a requirement of the program, you have to submit and close a payment reporting period. So make sure you're clicking on close once everything looks good. Closing is synonymous with submitting. So once you've closed this, then you've submitted your reporting period. I mentioned that the submission of the reporting period is contingent on being able to submit a payment request, but it's also a requirement of the program. So I'm going to go back to my reporting period section, and you do have a task that has been assigned to you that's associated with submitting your reporting period. So once you've submitted your reporting period, you can access your task by going into Tools and Tasks. And here you'll see a list of all the tasks that have been assigned to you. So you have your all the tasks that I mentioned that 2021 recipients have that need to be completed by today. So you have all your submit first payment request, download contract, sign and re-upload, complete the ACH form, identify recipient grant manager. These are all the tasks that are due today if you're a 2021 recipient. So make sure that you complete these actions and you mark the task as complete. Here, since I have submitted my first budget reporting period, this is my task for that. I'm going to go ahead and I can see that the task status is not started. I'm going to go and I'm going to check the box, or click the little check mark here to indicate that I've completed this task. So it's really important that after you submit your reporting period, that you're also going in and that you're marking the task to submit that reporting period as complete. Once you've marked your task as complete and you've submitted your reporting period, and if you've if you've added in all the expenses and if you're ready to submit for your final reimbursement, then you're ready to create your final reimbursement. So you can do that by going into the post-award menu, going to cash flow, and going to payment requests. Creating this payment request is going to be very similar to the process that you went through when you created your initial advanced payment request. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to, and what I should be seeing here is I should be seeing that first payment request that I've already submitted for the advanced amount. So I'm going to go into the top right-hand corner, locate the plus sign, which is going to allow me to create my reimbursement request, my payment request here. So I click on the plus sign, and this is going to take me to a screen that shows me some information and some details that I can enter in for my specific payment request. So when I'm entering my payment request, you'll notice here that the first items that you see on the page are items pertaining to your award, like your award name and other key details, like your award ID number um, and your recipient name. So those fields are going to be standard there. You'll be able to see that very easily on the payment request. Now there's a number of fields to fill out here. So when we are going in and when we're going to enter in the payment request, we need to give it a name. So our first payment request name was payment request 1, advanced request. This is our second payment request that we're submitting. So we're going to call this one payment request number 2, final reimbursement. And if you don't remember exactly what the naming convention requirements are, again, that documentation that's on the opportunity.nebraska website is, clearly outlines everything that we need to enter in here. So you'll name your payment request accordingly, select the date created, which, for me, is going to be today's date. Here it's going to ask you for reporting periods. So what you're going to want to see here is you're going to be able to see any reporting periods that you have expenses for that you've closed. So the fact that we went in and that we created and that we closed that reporting period will allow me to enter my reporting period in here. And you'll note, I'll just uncheck it. You'll note down here with the expenses, as soon as I choose my reporting period, my expenses that we've entered begin to appear. So if you have your expenses in one reporting period, you may have them distributed across multiple reporting periods. It's just important to add in any of the closed reporting periods that pertain to your expenses. Payment type, we're going to leave as reimbursement. Again, a deviation from the first advanced payment request that we submitted in the beginning of the project. Here, you'll be able to see the total amount expensed for your category. Here, you'll see how much of that is match. And then you'll see also the net total as well. And then there's a box here where you can enter in your requested amount. So it's very important here to remember that we've already submitted a request. We've already received half of our grant funds up front in the beginning of the project. So right now, even though we've added in expenses for all of the grant funds, we can really only request half of the grant funds. So since I've already received $7,500 from DED in grant funds, and I'm submitting my final reimbursement here, my requested amount on this final reimbursement needs to be the other half of those grant funds. So I'm going to fill this out for $7,500, which is exactly half of my awarded grant funded amount. So again, even though we've expensed we finally entered in expenses for the total amount of grant funds. We've already received half of our grant funds at the beginning of the program. So for our final request, we are only requesting the other half of those grant funds. And you'll always be able to see your remaining grant balance here. You'll be able to click this link and it'll kind of show you what you've already, received to date as well. Once you have all of this populated, you'll be able to go in and you will be able to click on submit. By clicking submit here, this actually submits your reimbursement request to DED so that they can review it and they can, they could take a decision on it, whether or not it's going to be approved or rejected. If there's something needs to be fixed, then they'll be able to indicate that with comments about what needs to be fixed. But once you're ready to submit this to DED, go ahead and click on this submit button here. And you'll see that your payment request has been submitted. Once it's submitted, you'll be able to click on your payment request screen. It'll show you all payment requests that you created, submitted, have approved. And really at the end of it, what you should be able to see here are two payment requests. That initial advance that you submitted in the beginning of your project, and then this is the final and the last payment request once your project is getting ready for closing. So that takes us to the end of the financial aspect of everything that we have to look at today. I will mention that once you submit this and once a decision is made on your payment request, at this point, you'll receive notification of whether your payment request has been approved or rejected, and that'll automatically update here in your account as well. So you will definitely be kept updated in terms of where you are and if your request has been approved or not. So the steps that we went through regarding the financial process, we went into the budget and we looked at our budget to see what was allocated to us. Through here, we did a 3-step process of creating expenses, submitting our reporting period, and submitting our payment request. So in the budget, to create our expenses, I went to the post-award financial and expenses tab, which brought us to our expense screen. I clicked on the plus sign to add in our expenses. Once we had all of our expenses added, and once we verified our expenses against the grant budget variance report by going to reports, post-award, grant budget variance report, we went into the post-award and management section to locate, create, and submit our budget reporting period. Once we did this, we went into the task to make sure that our task for submitting the reporting period was marked as complete by clicking the little check mark here. And then we went into post-award, cash flow, and payment requests to actually create that final reimbursement request. So that is a overview of the financial process and the steps to take to complete that within the system. So at this point, we're going to move on, and I want to focus on the performance element of this. So what I want to do is I want to navigate to our performance plan, because there are a couple of questions that you're going to be required to answer as well for this grant, for your project. So to find those, we're going to go into the post-award drop-down menu, select performance, and click on performance plan. So in your performance plan section, what you're going to do is you're going to see here 2 performance plan goals. Now, you may see additional performance plan goals. If you're a 2020 grantee, there should be additional performance plan goals that say archive. you do not have to touch any of those or complete any of those because those 4 archive goals are included in your final report that we'll be taking a look at. So again, you should have 2 performance plan goals that we need to enter achievement against. If you're a 2020 recipient, you'll have an additional 4 that say archive that you can just ignore. So here in the performance plan goal section, I'm going to go and I can look at my performance plan goal by clicking on the green highlighted part, and I can see here, what the question is. If I'm ready to answer this question, then I can locate the trophy icon. The trophy icon allows me to answer that question and to provide an answer. And in order to do that, I'm going to go to the plus sign here, where I'll be able to enter in the achievement date, so the date that I want to enter in here, as well as the answer to the question. So here they're asking, the question, which is asking for a high-level summary. So feel free to utilize this text box and enter your high-level summary and answer to the question in here. Note the asterisk to not mark this as complete unless this is accompanying your final, or unless this is for your final progress report. So if this is not part of the final report, if you're not closing your project out, then leave this box unchecked. If you are, go ahead and mark this as complete. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on create here, and that answers my first question. I'm going to go back to my performance plan section by clicking the performance plan tab. And here I have that second question I have of the planned project progress. And again, in order to answer this question, I can click on this trophy icon here, and it'll allow me to go in the top right-hand corner, click on the plus sign, the same instructions, don't mark it as complete unless it's my last progress report. And then here I need to provide an overview of the work being performed during the next reporting period. So here you'll type in your answer, same instructions of only marking this as complete if it's your last report. If you know that it's not your last report, leave the box unchecked, click create, and then you're always going to be able to enter in a new goal in your next reporting period, or whenever you're required to report on this next. Another way that you can go in, and another way that you can access your performance plan goals and achievements, is by the left navigation menu. You can go to activity and achievements, and you'll be able to access your performance plan goals and your achievements through here. I'm going to click back to the performance plan section. And once we have all of our goals entered, a similar process in that what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to submit a reporting period for your performance plan goals. So I'm going to go up to the top to the post-award drop-down menu here, and I'm going to go to our management section, and I'm going to click on reporting periods. The process of creating the reporting periods for your performance items is going to be very similar to what we did for the budget items, where we go to that reporting period section. I go to the top right-hand corner. I click on the plus sign to create my reporting period. It's going to ask me what type of reporting period do I want to create here. So I'm going to select achievements, because now I want to submit this reporting period for my achievements. And again, I'm going to be able to select the time frame for which my achievements have been entered. So since they were entered today on May 19th, those are going to fall within my March to the end of August reporting period here. So I click on that time frame and I click save. Here, you're going to be able to see that you have 2 goals and that you've entered in an achievement for each. Same process as the financial reporting period. Once you're ready to submit this, you can go ahead and click on close. Close is essentially the same thing as submitting this to DED. And again, this is a requirement. So after you enter in those achievements, you have to submit this reporting period. This lets DED know that you've answered those questions. So go ahead and click on close here. Now you can see that this has been closed and this has been submitted to DED. I'll go back to the reporting period section. And what you should be seeing here is your performance reporting period as showing up as closed. Just like with the budget reporting period, once you submit your performance reporting period, you go to tools and you go to tasks because you need to mark the task as complete. So I'm going to find my performance tracking period. It says not started. Since I just submitted it, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to check the box to mark it as complete. So for those performance plan goals, it's important to get in, go to the post-award performance plan section, answer those questions, submit a performance reporting period, and then mark the task as complete. Now, if you've done everything and you've completed your project, so you expensed all the grant funds and all the match funds, your project is done, you've answered all the questions, you've submitted all your reporting period, you submitted your final reimbursement, you want to close out your project. The last step is to submit your final report to DED. And that final report can be accessed here through the custom tab, and it's called final report. So again, when you're ready to close out your project and submit that final report, go to the custom tab and click final report. This will take you to a page that allows you to access, create, and submit your final report. The final report should only be created once you have all your performance reporting periods submitted, all your expenses created and submitted, and your final reimbursement request submitted as well. So go ahead, you go in the top right-hand corner, click on Create to get started with your report and to create your report. And here you'll see what's contained and what you have in terms of the different sections of this report here. So I'm going to start at the top and you just fill in everything accordingly. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in my contract number. Here you have to indicate if this is a planning or a construction project, and also be aware that depending on what type of project you have, that will determine which some of the sections you'll be completing. So there are sections that are specific to construction and planning. Here you have to indicate once these are completed, because remember, you're only submitting this final report once all these items have been completed. Here you'll see some of the questions that, again, if you're a 2020 recipient, these were the archive performance plan goals, but this is going to ask you what your total anticipated project cost was, and then you're going to answer some of these questions. These are highly valuable questions to answer for DED. So please make sure that you're going through here and you're entering in answers to all these questions. And I'm not being thorough here because I'm just answering the questions, but please make sure that you're being as thorough as possible. DED will use this information, so it's very important to go through here and give some thought to these answers. The compliance review section, everybody has to answer this section, regardless of whether it's a planning or a construction grant. And here, the project completion documentation, this is where it depends if it's a planning grant or a construction grant. So since it's a planning grant, since mine's a planning grant, I don't have to answer the questions in the construction section. I'm going to scroll down and I'm just going to upload and answer the questions in the planning section. Once you've uploaded your required documents, or if it's a construction grant, once you've filled out all the fields here, then go here and sign the certification statement, enter in your name, enter in your organization, and go ahead and click on create to create and submit this form. So again, we're accessing this final report only after the final performance reporting period has been submitted, your budget reporting periods have been submitted, and your final reimbursement has been submitted. You're going in to that custom tab, you're accessing this form, and you're filling out the form, and you're filling out the correct sections based on whether it's a planning grant or a construction grant. You may also already be accustomed to completing specific actions in the system and then also indicating in the task section that those are complete. And there is definitely a task associated with this final report. So when you want to mark that task as complete, go into the tools section, click on tasks. This will take you back to that task page. Scroll through and find your complete final report task and go ahead and mark it as complete once you've completed and submitted that form. So again, that final action, once you're ready to close out your project, go to the custom tab, you click on final report, you fill out the final report, you come back into the tools and the tasks section, and you mark that task as complete. So in terms of all of the actions that we wanted to go through here in the system, we talked about entering in expenses, submitting your reporting periods, submitting your reimbursement request when you're ready to close out your project. And again, submitting that reimbursement request for half of the grant funds that you've not already received in your advance payment. Then we went into the post-award and the performance plan, answered the 2 questions that need to be answered, submitted those reporting periods, and then submitted our final report form, all the while through each step marking tasks as complete to indicate that we've completed them. And of course, if you're a 2021 recipient, there are tasks that are due today. So please make sure that you're going into your grant and that you're taking these actions, completing the steps, and marking these tasks as complete. If at any point of the project you have any questions or you want to find that reference material, opportunity.nebraska.gov/amplifund is going to have your resources and the tools for you. Scroll down to the CCCFF section and you'll see here all of the award management documentation that'll walk you through everything that we looked at today, and then including any step-by-step videos and a copy of the training that we did today as well. So at this point, Since we've gone through all the different steps in the system, I'm going to pause briefly and we're going to review any questions that have come in during the course of the presentation. Also, if you've been holding your questions, please feel free to utilize the chat feature and get those questions submitted to us now. So I'm going to take a brief pause to review questions and we'll take a look. So we got one question already. It was about some of the specific numbers. I think that's something that we can look at specifically for your award to just make sure the awarded amounts and everything is correct. But you're on the right track in terms of seeing, looking at what you've already submitted and looking at the numbers. So we can take a look at your specific case and your specific award and get back to you. Thanks for the question. Yeah, feel free to continue to submit questions during this period of time as well. So another question came in about completing the task, but it had somebody else's name on the task chart. I would go in, and if you've completed those tasks, then I would definitely go in and I would make sure that those tasks are marked as complete. You do not necessarily have to change the task name or the name on the task. If you wanted to, then you could, or if you wanted to indicate in the notes on a task, then you could do that as well. And as we're compiling questions, and as you continue to submit your questions, just a couple of reminders. So the process and the requirements here for reporting is that expenses and achievements need to be entered every 6 months. But the final payment request and that final closeout form, that final report that we looked at, will not be submitted until the end. So every 6 months, you'll have those. Every 6 months, you'll have those due where you have to enter in expenses and performance plan achievements for that specific 6 month period of time. but the payment request and that final report will not be required until the end of the program. As we're compiling and gathering questions, one thing that I also wanted to point out to everybody as well, we talked at length about the resources that are available on the opportunity.nebraska.gov website. But being an Amplifund applicant user or being an Amplifund recipient user, you also have access to the Amplifund support site and to submit support tickets to Amplifund. So if you wanted to do that within the product, within Amplifund itself, you'll be able to go to the eye icon in your top right-hand corner, click on the help and support feature. And this will allow you to either access the Amplifund support site, which has just some general support documentation, not specific to the CCCFF program, but just kind of general how to use Amplifund. And then also the second part of this window will be your ability to create a support ticket. So if you're in Amplifund, you have any, if you need a technical assistance, you have any specific Amplifund related questions, then you'll be able to submit a support ticket to our customer support team by, you'll see your name and your email address will auto-populate here. Just type in the subject of your question and type in a description of your question or what your question is, and then go ahead and click on submit. Our customer support hours are Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Central Time. We have a 2-hour turnaround on responses. So if you want to interact with somebody and submit a support ticket to Amplifund support, you'll have the ability to do that by utilizing that eye icon or by submitting an email to support@amplifund.zendesk.com, which that information is also going to be provided in the slides so that you'll have that handy, you'll have that easily accessible. So specific CCCFF, Amplifund documentation and videos here on the opportunity.nebraska.gov website, but then also accessing the Amplifund support team for questions, utilizing that eye icon and submitting a support ticket. And I'll just pause again for any other questions. So no other questions have been submitted. I really appreciate everyone's time today. Couple of things before we wrap up, and as we're wrapping up, if you have additional questions, you can continue to submit those. Remember, opportunity.nebraska.gov/amplifund is where you'll be able to find the specific support resources for your CCCFF award. Also, accessing Amplifund support here. And then just remembering that, again, if you're a 2021 CCCFF recipient, to go in, you have those tasks that are due today. So again, I appreciate everyone's time through this session, as well as our first session that we had last month. I look forward to speaking with you and hearing from you in the future. If you need any assistance, please feel free to reach out to us, either on the DED side or the Amplifund side. And again, I just really appreciate everyone's time and participation today. So thank you very much, and I hope you guys have a nice rest of your day.